In this video I'll explain layers in Photoshop. So welcome to this third video in my video tutorials about Photoshop, and in this video we're going to be looking at layers. Now a lot of people get confused about layers when they first start looking at Photoshop or any program that uses layers. So I'm just going to explain very quickly before we do anything else how layers work. So at the moment you can see here I've got an image. You may have seen this before from one of my other videos, but we've got this image and it's sitting on one layer. So I'm looking at the layers panel here and I can see that we've got one layer and it's just got that image sitting on it. Now let me just explain how layers work. So if I just flip over to this graphic here, I've got this particular image and I've got three layers. I've got layer 1, 2 and 3. You can see them sitting here in this layers panel. And if I click on layer 1 here, now it says layer 1 copy, don't worry about that, but it says layer 1, and you can see there's like a blue shape at the top here, and that represents what we're seeing here on the main screen itself. So if I click on that particular layer and I move now the mouse around, you can see that I'm moving just that particular image on its own, so just that layer 1 graphic, which is obviously that box with the word layer 1 written in it. And I can do the same thing for layer 2. So if I go and click on layer 2 here, now anything that I move is just affecting layer 2. So I'm only moving layer 2 around the screen, and again if I do the same for layer 3 I can move layer 3 around. And that means that I can do things independently to these layers without affecting each other. So if for instance I want to resize layer 3, so just this area here, if I do the Control T button on the keyboard, it brings up a resize tool. So if I just now click and hold down the shift key while I'm dragging, you'll see that just layer 3 now gets affected. Okay, so let's just make that a bit bigger, and to put those in place I'm just going to hit my enter key on the keyboard, and that now sets that size for layer 3 to be as we've seen. And again if I move it around you can see I'm doing that. And let's say for layer 2 I want to make that smaller, so I'll just click on layer 2, again do Control and T and just resize that, again holding the shift key down while I do this, let go and hit my enter key, and you'll see now that layer 2 is small. And again I can move it around. If I go to layer 1 I can move that around, so they're still working independently of each other. But if I want to, I can do things to two layers or many layers at one time. So let's say I want to actually make layer 3 and layer 1 smaller. I can just do layer 3, so click it on the layers panel. Now this time I'm going to hold down the Control key because I just want to select that layer and that layer. So if I do that, in fact I've accidentally just double selected on that, so let me just redo that. So there we go. So I'm just holding down or just held down Control key, sorry, while I hit layers 3 and layer 1. Now if I click and move, you can see that both those layers are moving around, and if I want to resize them, so let's say I want to make them smaller, I do Control T again. Now you see that it's selected both those elements on those layers. Again just resize them to what I want. So we might do something like that, hit the enter key, and that puts those into place. So you can see now if I just click on layer 1 again, I can just easily move that around, and layer 3 move that around. If I want to move all of the layers, then it's simple enough. I just go down and click all of those layers like so, so they're all selected. Now they'll all move around. So with layers we can treat the elements on those layers individually and away from anything else, and it means we can do things to each layer without affecting the other layers. So for instance, another example, if I just go to layer 3, so I've just clicked on layer 3 on its own, so that's layer there. So let's make it a little bit bigger, shall we? So we do the Control T again, just to, actually Control T means transform, so that means you can do things like resizing and turning things around. So if you can see my mouse there has just gone from, you know, a diagonal arrows to this semicircular shape. I can then drag and turn things through different degrees. Let's put it something like that. Now what I can do is if I just hit the enter key, so it's now puts it at that angle. Going back to what we were going to do is we're just going to affect this layer 3, and I'm going to put something like a drop shadow on there. Now down here on the layers panel itself we've got this FX button, and if you give that a click you can see one of the elements there, or one of the options is drop shadow. So I'm going to put drop shadow on, and you can see if I just move, it's actually appeared on my other screen, if I move it over, there's the menu for drop shadow. So We can do different angles and distance and all that sort of stuff if you wanted to. So if I just bring that a little bit to the side, let's bring it so you can see. If I just bring the distance, you watch this shadow area here, it'll move. Yeah, so it's moving away. And the spread, so how fuzzy do we want to make it? So something like that, and the size makes it even fuzzier. So there we go. So you can do all that sort of stuff, but if you want to, here's a little trick. Rather than doing all this stuff, you can just simply go over to where that shadow is, that drop shadow, and just drag it to where you want it. So if I wanted it more like that, we can do that sort of thing. So if I hit the OK, so now it's layer 3, it's got this FX little symbol here showing that we've got some sort of FX effects going on. It shows me drop shadow. But again, if I now just make sure I've selected on that layer, just move it around. Now that layer is moving around with that drop shadow on. Another thing to have a look at as well is the order of these layers. So looking at what we've got layer 1 at the bottom, which is this layer here, then layer 2, the green layer, then layer 3, this red layer at the top. Now if I take layer 3, it's at the very top of the list, and I drag it over layer 2, which is this one down here, you'll see that layer 2 disappears because it's on top of layer 2. Layer 3 is on top of layer 2. And again, layer 3 is on top of layer 1. So if I drag layer 3 over layer 1, you'll see that that disappears as well. However, if I take layer 2, so if I click on layer 2 here, I click and drag it, I can go over the top of layer 1. Hopefully you can see that. Let's just zoom in a little bit. So you can see that layer 2 is sitting on top of layer 1 because in the list it's above layer 1. But if I drag layer 2 and try to think I'm going to put it on top of layer 3, well no, it goes underneath layer 3 because again layer 3 in the list of order here, or the way it's laid out, layer 3 is on top. So we've got to bear that in mind when we're moving layers around, that we have layers on top of each other. We may want to change the order. So for instance, I may not want layer 3 covering everything. I might want layer 2 on top of layer 3. Very simple to do. We just go to the layer here, click the layer we want to move, and I'm clicking and holding my mouse key down, and I'm just going to drag the layer down to below layer 2. You can see there's sort of like a solid line appear, so let me just let go. Look around here, you'll see a solid line appear. So as I click and drag, you see a solid line appear. There we go. And that's saying now if I let go of the mouse, it will put that layer underneath layer 2. So there we go. So layer 2 now is on top, layer 3 is the next one down. You can see that's actually changed the order here as well, as we'd expect. So layer 2 is now sitting on top of layer 3. Oops, let's go and click layer 2, and you'll see now that it works maybe as we wanted it. So layers, I like to think of them as sheets of tracing paper, if you like. So if we think that this is the table, the white layer here at the background is at the very bottom, that's the table. We've got a sheet of tracing paper with the image of layer 1 written on it, so that's that one there. And then on top of that we've got layer 3 now, and then layer 2 sits above all of them. And just by laying these sheets of tracing paper on top of the table, I can see different layers, but I could also slide that sheet for layer 1 tracing paper sheet. I can move that, oops, do the right one, I can move that around independently of the other 2 layers. So I know it's a little bit quick, but that's just a quick explanation on what layers are and the sort of things we can do with them. And obviously as we start to manipulate images, so if I go back to here, so if we're going to do things with this image here, which we'll do in the next video, we'll be using layers quite extensively. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope it's been useful. If you've enjoyed it, give me a thumbs up. If it's been useful, obviously give me a thumbs up. Maybe think about subscribing to my channel, and by all means leave a comment. Do like your comments, and I do like to have a chat with people, so please pop any questions or anything you have into the comments, and I'll get round to answer them. Okay, until next time, thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you again.